The ground shook beneath the frozen earth of northern Siberia. Deep in the permafrost, something ancient stirred. Scientists at the Arctic Research Station Omega had been monitoring strange seismic activity for weeks. Dr. Elena Volkov stood before her instruments, watching the readings spike to impossible levels. The temperature outside had already dropped to -70 degrees, and it was still falling. Beneath the ice, buried for over 10,000 years, the creature opened its eyes. They glowed like frozen stars in the darkness of its prison. The blue frost giant, a being that existed before human civilization began, was waking from its long sleep. Its body stretched nearly 300 meters tall, composed of living ice and ancient cosmic energy. The legends of every northern culture had warned about this day. The Norse called it the Herald of Ragnarok. The Inuit named it the Eternal Winter. The Siberians whispered of the Blue Death. The giant rose slowly from the permafrost. Mountains of ice cracked and fell away from its shoulders. Its breath created instant blizzards that spread across the landscape like a plague. Within hours, the temperature across the entire northern hemisphere began to drop. Emergency broadcasts flooded every channel. Governments scrambled to understand what was happening. Satellite images showed something impossible rising from the Russian wilderness. Elena watched through the station window as the creature stood to its full height. It was beautiful and terrible. Its skin was the color of deep ocean ice, and veins of glowing blue light pulsed beneath the surface. When it opened its mouth and roared, the sound carried for thousands of kilometers. Windows shattered in cities across northern Asia. The roar carried a message that every living being could somehow understand in their bones. Winter had come, and it would last 1,000 years. The United Nations held an emergency session within 12 hours. Military forces from every major nation mobilized, but their weapons seemed laughable against a creature of such size. The first missiles struck the giant as it walked slowly southward. They exploded against its icy hide like fireworks against a mountain. The creature did not even pause. Its footsteps created earthquakes. Its breath brought instant death to anything it touched. Cities in its path were evacuated. The millions still died in the chaos. Dr. Marcus Chen at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory worked without sleep for 3 days. His team analyzed every piece of data they could gather. The giant was not just a physical creature. It existed partially in another dimension, drawing power from somewhere beyond normal space. Its presence was literally pulling heat energy out of the atmosphere and channeling it elsewhere. If it continued, the entire planet would freeze within months. Humanity did what humanity always does when faced with extinction. It fought back, not with weapons alone, but with intelligence and determination. Research teams across the world shared data freely. Old rivalries between nations disappeared overnight. Russian scientists worked alongside American ones. Chinese engineers collaborated with European physicists. The entire species united against a common enemy for the first time in history. Elena volunteered to lead a dangerous mission. She had noticed something in her data that others had missed. The giant's power seemed to fluctuate slightly at certain times. There was a pattern, a rhythm like a heartbeat. If they could understand that rhythm, maybe they could find a weakness. She assembled a team of the bravest researchers she knew. They would approach the creature on foot, getting close enough to take measurements that satellites could not provide. The team set out in specialized vehicles designed to withstand extreme cold. Even so, the temperature around the giant was beyond anything they had prepared for. Equipment failed. 3 team members died from exposure despite their protective suits. Elena pressed forward. She had to understand this creature. She had to find a way to stop it. Meanwhile, a young engineer named James Wright in Australia had a crazy idea. He had been studying the energy readings from the giant. The creature was not creating cold. It was absorbing heat and sending it somewhere else. What if they could reverse that flow? What if they could overload it with more energy than it could handle. He presented his theory to the International Council. Most scientists dismissed it as impossible, but a few listened. Elena reached the base of the giant after losing half her team. She stood in the shadow of a being older than human memory. Her instruments recorded data that would change physics forever. The creature seemed to notice her, a tiny figure at its feet. It looked down with eyes that held the cold of deep space. Elena expected to die in that moment. Instead, the giant paused. Something in its ancient mind recognized her courage. It did not kill her. James Wright continued developing his plan. He proposed building a network of fusion reactors specifically designed to channel energy directly at the giant. The plan would require every nation contributing their nuclear resources. It would take weeks to build. The planet might not survive that long, but it was the only plan anyone had that might actually work. The giant continued its march south. It crossed from Russia into Europe, leaving a trail of frozen destruction. Paris became a city of ice. London was buried under 50 meters of snow. The death toll rose into the hundreds of millions. Refugees fled south, overwhelming every border. Civilization teetered on the edge of complete collapse. But humanity refused to surrender. Elena made it back to civilization with her data. Her readings showed that the giant had a core, a central point where all its energy converged. That core was vulnerable, but only for brief moments when the creature channeled its power outward. Those moments corresponded exactly to when it created its worst storms. The giant was strongest and weakest at the same time. It was a tiny window of opportunity, but it was something. Construction crews worked around the clock in locations across the southern hemisphere. They built James Wright's energy network in record time. Engineers solved problems in hours that should have taken years. Workers pushed themselves beyond all reasonable limits. Many died from exhaustion and accidents. They kept working anyway. The future of their children depended on it. The giant reached the Mediterranean Sea. It walked across the water, freezing it solid with each step. Northern Africa, the last warm refuge for billions of people, lay directly in its path. The temperature there had already dropped below freezing. Crops failed. Water sources froze. The final catastrophe was approaching. Elena joined James Wright's team to coordinate the attack. They had one chance. The energy network was ready. Fusion reactors across 5 continents stood prepared to fire simultaneously. They needed to hit the giant's core at exactly the right moment during one of its power surges. The timing had to be perfect. The moment came on a Tuesday morning. The giant stopped in what had once been Libya. It raised its arms to the sky and began channeling the largest burst of power yet. This storm would cover the entire planet. This would be the final winter. Elena watched her instruments. She counted down the seconds. At exactly the right moment, she gave the command. Energy poured into the giant from every direction. Beams of focused fusion power struck its body from reactors in Brazil, South Africa, Australia, India, and Argentina. The combined power of human nuclear technology, channeled through the most advanced focusing systems ever built, converged on the creature's core. The giant screamed. The sound was heard around the entire planet. It staggered backward, its icy body cracking under the assault. The blue glow in its veins flickered. For one terrible moment, Elena thought it would recover. Then James Wright pushed the system beyond its design limits. He overloaded every reactor simultaneously, giving the creature more energy than it could possibly absorb. The explosion was visible from space. The giant shattered into 1 trillion pieces of ice that scattered across 3 continents. The energy it had stored released all at once, creating a momentary heat wave that melted everything within 1,000 kilometers. Then silence fell. The world held its breath. Days passed. The temperature slowly began to rise. Scientists confirmed that the creature was truly destroyed. Its dimensional anchor had collapsed. The entity that had threatened to freeze the planet for 1,000 years was gone forever. Elena stood in the ruins of what had been the giant's final resting place. She found something among the ice fragments, a small crystal that pulsed with residual energy. She would study it for the rest of her life, trying to understand where the giant had come from and why it had awakened. Her research would eventually lead humanity to the stars. James Wright became a hero. He refused all honors and returned to his normal life, saying he had just done what anyone would do. But his name would be remembered for as long as humans existed. The engineer who saved the world with an impossible idea. The recovery took decades. Billions had died. Cities lay in ruins, but humanity rebuilt. They rebuilt better than before. The cooperation that had defeated the giant did not disappear when the threat ended. Nations continued working together. The technology developed to fight the creature advanced human civilization by centuries. Children born after the long winter, as it came to be known, learned about it in school. They learned how their ancestors had faced something from beyond human understanding and refused to kneel. They learned that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how impossible the odds, humanity would always find a way. The blue crystal that Elena recovered eventually revealed its secrets. It contained information from another dimension, a dimension of cold and darkness where beings like the giant were common. There were others sleeping beneath the ice of distant worlds. Humanity would need to be ready. They began building ships to carry their determination to the stars. 100 years after the giant fell, the first human expedition reached another solar system. They found a frozen planet with something buried beneath its surface. This time, humanity was prepared. They did not wait for it to wake up. They did not run. They faced the darkness with the same courage their ancestors had shown. The universe learned that day what Earth had learned during the long winter. Humans were small. Humans were fragile. Humans lived brief lives on a tiny world in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. But humans did not give up. They did not surrender. When ancient horrors rose to destroy them, they built weapons and fought back. When gods of ice threatened eternal winter, they burned brighter than the sun. The blue frost giant had awakened expecting to rule a frozen world for 1,000 years. Instead, it had awakened something far more dangerous than itself. It had awakened humanity's refusal to die quietly. In the cold darkness between stars, that fire would never go out.